What's up, guys? If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Also, please smash that like button on the video and enjoy the show.
It's not really that important, but it wasn't initially when this thing was reported on, it was described as being hourly pings. That's pretty much true, but it's not entirely true because there were these two other events that kind of got in there and messed up the timing.
Got it. But the general pattern was, I understand.
Yeah.
So you also, because you were like the lead role in the Netflix documentary on MH370. What's it called again? I just call it the MH370 doc.
MH370, the plane that disappeared.
Got it. So I think there were 3 parts to that. It's a very good documentary. Hey guys, if you have a second, please be sure to share this episode around on social media and with your friends, whether it's Reddit, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, doesn't matter. It's all a huge help. It gets new eyeballs on the show, and it allows us to grow and survive. So thank you to all of you who have already been doing that, and thank you to all of you who are going to do so now. But one of the things you were talking about was, once it got to that point, I want to say when it was over the Andaman Sea, where this starts reading it, you don't know the directionality. So it could be north, it could be moving north, or it could be moving south. Can you explain how that works and why that is the case?
Yes. So we've got these 7 pings, and what do these pings consist of? Now, the Malaysian Airlines at this time was in sort of financial difficulty. So everything that they did, they later went bankrupt in part as a result of this. There's different levels of subscription service that you can get when you sign up for your satellite communications.
Oh my God.
The good one, like when you send each transmission, it includes like where you are, right? From GPS. They had the discount version that didn't have any of those frills, bells, and whistles, right? And so because of that, these signals were just like housekeeping data that didn't really have any purpose unless you were trying to maintain your satellite fleet. So the scientists had this data, and they're like, damn, how do we figure out, is there some way we can use this data to figure out where this plane is? Now, the mere fact that the data existed is extremely interesting because they had assumed that when they started looking for this plane, they assumed that it crashed right where they last saw it, because most plane crashes, things start to go wrong. When things go wrong in an airplane at altitude, they tend to come unglued very quickly. So Air France 447, which we were talking about earlier, it had also sent some automatic transmissions of a different nature. But the plane was eventually found within 5 miles of where those last transmissions were made. So the initial assumption was that this plane is going to be really close to where we last saw it in the Andaman Sea, as you just saw on that map. The fact that it went for 6 more hours, that we were talking earlier about, like, this is a crazy case.
Yes.
Okay. Let's just become comfortable with the idea that strange things are going to happen again and again and again.
Yes.
Expectations are going to be defied. This is a defying of expectations right here. The idea that this plane flew for 6 more hours and you're going like, I don't know, 400 or 500 miles an hour, you can go really far in a jet plane in 6 hours. So this plane could be almost not anywhere.
The radius is huge.
The radius is huge.
Yes.
And so what else can we figure out from this data? Is there some other clue? We're scientists. Like, we tease out signals from data all the time. So what can we look at? So they looked at it carefully. They put on their thinking caps, and they realized that there was 2 parts of this metadata that was potentially really interesting. The first one was called burst timing offset. It's often referred to as BTO. BTO is a measure of how long it took the plane to respond when the satellite said, "Hi, are you there?" So the plane says, "Hi, how are you there?" The plane received the message, thought about it in its machine way, and then responded and sent a signal back. So there's 2 components to this time. One is the amount of time it takes light to travel through space, and the other is a well-known computational process. So they can subtract the time for the computational process, and what's left is a light speed time. And from that, you can figure out distance. So from this BTO data, you know how far the plane is from the satellite. And it's just, if you take the universe of all points that are a certain distance from another point, it's a sphere. If you take the intersection of two spheres, meaning the surface of the Earth and this first sphere we're talking about, you get a circle. So this plane was somewhere on this circle. Now, you can also rule out, because we knew where the plane basically was when the first ping happened. We know that the maximum speed, this plane can't fly more than about 4/5 of the speed of sound. So you're able to narrow it down. So you have these basically what they call arcs. And for each of these 7 pings, you know that it had to be somewhere on this arc. And there's another step that you can read about on my blog, or we talk about it in the podcast. There's a kind of math that you can do that will actually allow you to derive a path from those arcs.
How does that work?
It has to do with probability and aeronautical performance and a couple of other things. But so let me not get into it right now, if you don't mind.
Okay,
Maybe we
no
could
problem.
circle back to it if you want to get into it. It's like, I feel like it's a fairly long walk.
Okay.
But I would definitely encourage people to, we did a podcast episode called Root that talks about how you do that derivation. So when they had this idea, they thought, well, let's test it on some other planes that we have data on, because they keep data on all planes. And they did it, and it matched pretty well. It doesn't give you an exact line, but it gives you a very narrow probability distribution. So what scientists look for, people tend to think that like scientists like are looking for the answer, but really what they're more commonly looking for is a sort of a probability distribution of like, what can the range of answers be, right? Like if your son is growing up, as mine is, and they measure their height every year, and from your child's height each year, they can kind of project into the future as to how tall they're going to be when they're grown up. And of course, the older the kid is, the more accurate it gets. But you don't know if your 8-year-old is 4'2", you can say, well, he might be 5'6", he might be 5'8".
Sure, big range.
There's a range, and so that's what I'm talking about.
They would have thought I was going to be like 5'5" when I was 8.
Right,
I'm 6'1".
J.H. Wheaties.
Yeah.
So anyway, you're able to derive a route, and it has a certain error margin. So it's like, we know that this plane was kind of going along this route, plus or minus, let's say, 30 miles. There's a trick, though, because the way that this method works is it's symmetrical. It can either go to the right or it can go to the left. So essentially, however this plane went, and you can do this for any plane, you can use its BTO data to generate the route that it went, to tell you the route that it went. But for every route, there's a mirror that it didn't go. It's like a ghost image. And this is like a very important point when we talk more about the sort of possible alternatives, is which of these paths is the right one and which is the mirror. And the second, so so to resolve that, they realized that there was a second part of the metadata that was useful. This is called the BF, or burst frequency offset. And this, through a set of mathematical techniques, which is even more arcane and took the Inmarsat scientists a couple weeks to figure out, tells you which one was right. And it turns out that when you do the math, the plane went south. So the plane could have gone south, it could have gone north, but we know that the south one is right because we have this metadata called the burst frequency offset that tells us the plane went south. A way to understand this is that the satellite actually was wandering in its orbit. None of this would work except so the satellite system was designed to have a BFO value of 0. It wasn't supposed to have a burst frequency offset, but because the satellite had been in service for longer than its warranted lifespan, so it had started to run out of fuel. It carried fuel that allowed it to adjust its orbit, but it was running low, so they weren't using it. Yeah. So the satellite was going up and down out of the plane of its orbit. And because of that, it was creating a signal. And so when if the plane was going south and the satellite was going south, the difference in its relative frequency would be less than if the plane was going north and the satellite was going south. That's how they basically did
The
it.
positioning. Got it. Okay. So the theory that emerged saying it would have gone south
Right.
for 6 hours means that it would have ended up run out of fuel smack dab in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
Correct.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.